It's 11 o'clock. I'd like to welcome everyone to our second virtual supplier forum. So this is around the AS13100 deployment and transition is going to be our focus. My name is Barbara Negroi, and I am the current chair of the AESQ. We are very excited to welcome all of you to this couple-hour event. I think we have a lot of good content ready for you, and I encourage your participation. You'll see that we're coming to you as an industry group to show that we are united and one team as we move forward. So welcome, and I'll turn it over to Becky for some housekeeping.
Thank you, Barbara. So just to let everyone know, we are recording today's session. We will post the video online on the AESQ website in a couple of days, and you can re-watch it at your own convenience or pass it along to others to watch. And just again to say welcome, thank everyone for joining us today. We do have over 500 people registered for today's webinar from 30 countries around the world, so that's fantastic. Thank you. My name is Becky Lemon. I'm the Industry Program Manager at SAE, managing the AESQ and its various activities. And I will be running the Slido poll questions today. We have a couple of poll questions using Slido software, and we're going to ask you to answer those during certain slides. They should work for most people, but I know some companies do have security restrictions on Slido. So if you can't see it, don't worry about it. You can always type your answer into the chat feature if you want to do it that way, but we will talk you through those poll questions. And Jim, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone, from sunny Phoenix. My name is Jim Wilson. I work for Pratt & Whitney, and I'm going to be monitoring the questions that are coming in today. Please feel free to enter questions as the speakers are going on. We have a question and answer period at the end of the meeting. I'll be searching for questions that are repetitive, where multiple people are looking for the same answer, or where someone has pointed out maybe something that we didn't cover as well as we could have, and we'll get back to it with the speakers that are there. So please put in as many questions as you can. We obviously will not be able to get to all questions today during the presentation, but we will be looking at those questions and providing answers to them on the AESQ website. May take a little while, but we will get them to the subject matter experts for AS13100, the various experts we have, and we'll get their responses and we'll post those on the website. So take the time to write the question, please. We will take the time to get you an answer and get it up on the website.
Thanks, Jim. So, Barbara, I'm going to turn it over to you at this point to talk about our supplier forums. Looks like you're on mute.
Thank you for that, Becky. You know, what we're doing right here is a supplier forum. It's just in a virtual sense. We were fortunate pre-COVID, pre-pandemic to do supplier forums in person, and we greatly hope to get back to that very shortly. These are typically held twice a year. We would and have rotated through North America, Europe, and Asia to try and make sure that as many people and suppliers are incorporated in region. The reason for that is to really get the voice of the supplier. Why we're here, and I'll explain that in a little bit, is to improve our communication and simplify our strategy with suppliers. So in those forums, like today, we're providing updates on what AESQ is working for, sharing best practices, and then looking for that feedback from suppliers on what's the next thing to work on. Next page. Yeah, from the supplier forum perspective, and what we're going to be talking about today is the 13,100 deployment. That's on all of our minds. We have time between now and when it's coming due at the end of next year to work through that. So we want to highlight all of the tools that we have available to the supply base so that everyone is able to use the latest and greatest information to advance ourselves in terms of approaching and meeting that specification and standard. Next page. So the agenda today, we have the, just going through the overview. I'm gonna just talk to everybody about AESQ, how we started, and what our vision and mission is. There may be some new people not familiar with AESQ, and so I want to make sure that the team here understands what that is. Larry Bennett's going to give an overview of the 13,100 standard to really explain what's in it and what the expectations are. We're then going to go into a deployment introduction and then details around the deployment, where we have a strategy option that GKN is going to tell you about in terms of how they're going about the deployment. And we really like it and think that it's something that everyone can take away and learn from. We're also going to talk about subject matter interest groups and how you can get involved. We're going to talk about human factors, because that's in addition to the 13,100 specification, and everyone has a lot of questions about that. And then give a couple examples of how you can get involved in AESQ. Next page. We talked about this before. Feel free to use the chat function for any questions. I already see a lot coming through. We will not, those will be with us. So we'll be able to, whether we get to them today, as Jim mentioned, or we're able to go back later, answer your questions, and then even put, if there's standard questions that keep repeating, it means a lot of people have the same question and interest. We'll be able to put that on the AESQ website for all to see. Next page. And I will introduce myself. So I'm going to go ahead and kick us off here. I'm the Executive Sourcing Quality Leader for GE Aviation and the current chair for the AESQ. Very happy to be here to talk about the AESQ, what we are about, and kind of what our vision and strategy is. Next page. So the Aero engine industry burning platform. The aero engine manufacturers created a collaboration working group to address the burning platform in 2013 with key global suppliers, using the automotive example of QS9000 that Ford, GM, and Chrysler used. What was that burning platform? What actually still is that burning platform? It's the platform that airline passengers are increasing year after year after year. And at that time, it was set to double in the next 20 years. The pandemic clearly put a slowdown in that, but we are very quickly ramping back up to 2019 records, and the forecast continues to grow and grow in the coming years. So this is still very valid. Our customers expect zero defects. Every customer, including the flying customer, expects zero defects. Increasing level of supplier-made engine content. Our global supplier footprint is expanding. More parts from an OEM perspective are moving from make to buy, and clearly our supply base is global, very global. There's a large number of common suppliers across the engine OEMs, and it's a wide range of aerospace engine suppliers in this business. You can have anyone from a couple people, less than $1 million annual revenue, to tens of thousands of people, global footprint, greater than in the $1 billion range. So there's clearly a wide range of aerospace suppliers. And then our goal is to improve quality, cost, and delivery, and that remains a challenge. Next page. We recognize that defect prevention is the key to what we do. And we've created we think a really nice video. It's called a zero defect video. We're unable to play it in this broadcast. We've trialed it before, and there's just inconsistencies with who will be able to hear it and who won't be able to hear it. So what we're just letting you know is that it exists. It's on our AESQ website. It is well worth your time to go to. There is a link at the end of this presentation, but you can also go to AESQ website and see it. Play it for your team members, play it for your sub tiers. really understand it, but it connects all of the tools of supply of our specifications in addition to APQP, and it explains how it all works together in a system for success. Next page. So in creating this collaboration, we want to talk a little bit about our purpose. Our purpose is to simplify and standardize the Aero engine supplier requirements through the removal of duplication and waste. Create a common language for quality, build on existing industry standards where they exist. Our goal is to always go back to an industry standard, not create new standards. Create requirements that are simple, prescriptive, and auditable. Promote the use of standardized third-party training. Deliver results with pace, means move quickly throughout, our say-do ratio of what we're going to do, and focus on effective deployment and improving the capability of the shared supply chain. Next page. So who is the AESQ? So we're made up of 10 member companies, 10 voting member companies. So for all of our standards and all of the actions that we do, these are the 10 that vote on that. So it's made up of GE Aviation, Pratt & Whitney, Rolls-Royce, Safran Aircraft Engines, MTU Aero Engines, GKN Aerospace, Honeywell Aerospace, Howmet Aerospace, IHI, and PCC Structurals. And just recently this year, we've added 3 additional AESQ members, non-voting members, but members of AESQ, and that's Cincinnati Thermal Spray, Consolidated Precision Products, and Meggitt PLC. So welcome. In case you're interested, these are the voting members from each of those 10 member companies. And you can clearly see that, very centered around high-level quality leadership within each of these companies. And the reason why that's important is because we're able to make decisions in this AESQ group. We're able to make decisions that become impactful into our businesses and then flow through the supply base. And I think it's been fantastic to partner with each other, to work through, joint issues and improvements throughout the supply base. So these are the 10 voting members from each company. Next page. The AESQ vision is to establish and maintain a common set of quality requirements that enable the global aero engine supply chain to be truly competitive through lean, capable processes, and a culture of continuous improvement. I feel like that's important to show so that you can see everything that we work on. It ties back to that, as well as the purpose that I mentioned before. Next page. Just to kind of show where things started, and then we're going to go through kind of the journey we've been on, and then where we are today throughout the next couple of hours. But where things started is really focused on requirements flow down to our suppliers, which is the aero engine supply chain at the very bottom there. It's very clear that this is a regulated industry. There are a lot of requirements and standards to follow, and it has never been more important that we do follow these standards for the safety of our flying public. So we have regulation requirements, we have the customer requirements, which is us, and then we have industry requirements such as AS9100, NADCAP, AS9145, etc. All of those get combined into our individual manufacturer OEM requirements that get flowed down to the supplier. So if you are a supplier of multiple OEMs, you will get the Sabre, you'll get S1000 from GE, you'll get ASQR and SAFE. The conversations that we have within AESQ is, that's a lot of information and likely says a lot of similar things in different ways. How can we work together to simplify these standards and flow down some more consolidated standards to the supply base? Next page. So immediately the steps that were taken over the last few years, several years, is from each of those standards, the idea was, okay, so PFMEA and control plans are talked about in each of those standards. Let's work together to create one common standard, AS 13004, and eliminate the language within our own standards. MSA, it's another one. Let's work together, and on down. That has been a huge improvement. However, we then realized we have several standards that are all common across the OEMs in addition to our standards. So we want to take it one step further in terms of simplification. And that's where 13100 was born. The idea was born is let's take all of these standards and then let's go deep into our own individual standards, talk and work across our businesses, and really come up with a single standard across that we can flow down to our suppliers. And really that's what we've created. Next page. As we've created these standards, we've done supplier forums, and we've really tried to start improving the tool usage and understanding of how we can move to a zero defect culture, how we can meet those burning platform requirements across the supply base. And these are just a few of the examples of best practices that have been really talked about in person at supplier forums. We think that it's best to hear from a fellow supplier than maybe an OEM sometimes on how these standards has changed the way they work, really can come through with success and change the game on quality. So we had examples here of FMEAs, how they were used and how it really changed the game for Sam Suzhou from using AS 13004, 13003, and 13006. With GK and Newington to create a fan case that was delivered defect-free, which is quite amazing. And then some examples of AS 13006 using real-time SPC to produce zero defect blades. So there's lots of examples out there, and our goal in combining everyone together is to have these discussions and compare best practices, ask questions and get clarification. All right, so the next page. From here, I'm going to turn it over to Larry Bennett to talk about structure and key highlights of AS 13100. Larry is the consulting engineer for the Global Sourcing Quality Organization at GE Aviation. And Larry, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Barbara. Next.
You are not on video, just let you know, I don't think.
Okay, so Barbara showed the state as it was in I think 2012 timeframe when AESQ was birthed, and let me just start by sharing a little bit of passion. So I want to go back about 20 years ago when I was in the supplier world as a supplier, just as most as you are today, and facing multiple requirements from each of the OEMs. So as a supplier, we had customers just like your customer base, we each with their own unique set of requirements. And so now fast forward to 2018 when Barbara asked if I would be interested in joining a team to commonize requirements across the aerospace industry. And my passion was just a little bit excited that, to go from asking for it 20 years ago to now being a part of the solution, it feels pretty incredible. And so you can see the future vision was that we took out that middle row of the aero engine manufacturers' requirements, and we replaced those with a common set of requirements across the aero engines group. Pretty exciting, I think, for my desk, and hopefully you feel the same. Next. So you can see here on the left-hand side, we actually met in Rolls-Royce at their corporate offices with representatives from Rolls and Pratt and Safran and GE, and we actually shared each of our quality system requirements. That was not a permitted practice for a long time, but the industry has changed and attitudes have changed, and so it was really good that everybody got together, shared, talked, dialogued. We took those into and turned them into a draft standard that was socialized and reviewed by all of the member companies. And we turned that into what we have today as a published document. And I want to tell you that the overall number of requirements have been reduced by greater than 50%. And those are all supplemented by this core reference manual library, which is detailed and very prescriptive from how to. It's not requirements, but it's guidance on how to deploy. And I think that's what sets us apart from most of the other industry documents is we don't just give you a set of requirements, but we work with you to deploy them successfully. Next. So just to kind of, again, to lean on commonization, we are playing on 9100 and the numbering scheme, the clauses, the chapters, etc. So you can see, as an example, 9.3 management review, the text that is not bold is actual 9100 text, and then we add additional requirements to that for the AESQ AS13100 specific. So that's the way the entire standard is organized, that it is playing in the same numbering and paragraph references that already exist within the 9100. We didn't create a new number structure and a new organization. We're playing in the same space. Next. And then, you know, there are still some things, as hard as we tried as an industry team, there are some things that we just could not rationalize and be consistent with. And so those are now still in the customer specific requirements. So GE, Pratt, Rolls, and Safran will still have some leftover requirements that were not able to be rationalized. And those would include maybe specific IT references, specific customer ways of handling nonconformances or electronic applications possibly. And I'll share here in a little bit how GE actually is deploying that. And I believe Rolls-Royce has an example as well. Next. But this time, you know, we're showing the tables out of table 1 and 2 out of the standard. So this is a good time to ask a poll question just to see what organization types we have on the call today.
So this is Becky. I've turned on the poll for everyone. Please feel free to start voting. If you can't see the poll, there should be a little green button down towards the bottom right of your screen that turn on Slido polling. If that does not work, there may be a security issue, and that's okay. But we're going through the question here. So which organization type best describes your organization? We have 35 votes so far, so we'll give it about another 10 seconds or so here and let everyone get their votes submitted. It looks like type 1 is in the lead with make to print. But type 2A, design and manufacturers, coming up in second place there. A few more seconds, everyone. Go ahead and submit your votes. Okay, so we have 72 votes. Larry, we're going to stop it there, but that gives us an idea. So the results are type 1, make to print, has 51%. Type 2A, design and manufacture, has 28%. And then type 2B, design only, 1%. Type 3, distributor, got 7%. Type 4, special process, got 7% also. And then type 5, raw material, received 5%.
Okay, sounds like we've got representatives from each of those organization types. All right, thank you for your participation. So before we leave this slide, let me just say that we have spent time identifying in table 1 each of the paragraph from the standard and what organization types it applies to. And I think this is kind of groundbreaking in the sense that, you know, when we shared this with the 9100 team, they really like this. And so I think they're interested in doing something similar. So it gives a clear roadmap for each organization type, what elements actually apply. And there was a lot of discussion when creating this table. And then table 2 plays into that. If you're a type, for instance, a type 3 distributor is required to be 9120 registration. And I specifically picked that one because I saw that there was a question from someone earlier in the chat that if you're a distributor, do you need to be 9100 certified? And the answer to that question would be 9120 versus 9100. Next. So you can see just some of the highlights from the standard itself. The first one I want to highlight is the compliance assessment. Section 4.35 requires that a compliance assessment is performed. And we have a reference manual 13,009 that is great information to help support and accomplish that task. And the compliance assessment really should be no different than what most of you as quality professionals have seen when you tried to deploy AS9100 or AS9100 Rev C to Rev D. You've got a compliance matrix, you've got all the standard requirements row by row, and then you show how you're accomplishing or satisfying those requirements. And really, that's really what we're trying to do here, is take each of the standard elements and how are you complying or meeting them. Next. And so 8.3, design and development. We have a number of requirements that are, we obviously are deploying 9145, APQP, and PPAP. We are defining design FMEA approach to be a consistent format for the FMEA. We're requiring the use of cross-functional teams because we should all appreciate and recognize that a team of one is not a team. And in order to be successful with deploying a true quality plan, it requires a cross-functional approach. And then the design requirements for design of X. And lastly, specify the use of AS9116 to manage design changes. And reference manual 13,008 provides detailed guidance for accomplishing all the tasks related to design and development. Next. Section 8.4.1.2 and 0.3 has a significant amount of detail for supplier evaluation, selection, control, and performance monitoring. I can tell you without reservation that one of the biggest pain points for GE, and I'm sure for our other OEMs, if they had a voice right now, would be supplier control. Because our regulators, our government oversight, all see that as a significant risk point. And so we felt as an industry, this was one of the weakest areas of the standard. And so we made sure that we had sufficient detail and control and requirements related to all aspects of supplier control. And this is not you as a prime, this is sub-tier control. Next. Some of the benefits should be pretty clear by now. We have a single standard, less requirements. We've already said about 50% less, lower cost. You don't have to buy 13,000, 13,002, 3, 4, 5, 6, and all the future ones that might come. You now only have to buy a single standard, AS13100. Supported by free issue reference manual guides, minimize the content of OEM requirement standards, creates a common language, aligns to existing industry standards, and not just aligns to them, but I also would be remiss not to state that in addition to aligning with 9100, most of the requirements that are in 13100 already existed in an individual OEM requirements. So it might have been in Pratt, it might have been in Rolls, it might have been in GE. Now it's a standard requirement because we see the goodness of that from an organization standpoint and from an industry. Enables OEMs to provide a harmonized approach to supplier development, and supplier compliance continues to be assessed through the audits, and allows AESQ to focus on supply chain capability development. Next. I'd be remiss not to continue to give credit where credit is due. The individuals you see on your screen were the front center on the development of this standard. It would not have happened without consistent, sometimes, yeah, it was a lot of hashing. Sometimes there were disagreement, But at the end, I think we all, to a person, feel very good about the work that was done. And I specifically want to point out Dr. Riggs from Rolls-Royce, our team leader, our writing team leader, and with the tenacity and the vision to make sure that this got carried through. So thanks to each one on the screen. Next. In addition to that, 99 subject matter experts across the organizations that helped develop and publish the reference manuals. Just a significant amount of contribution. Thank you. And I mentioned the supporting reference manuals. There's a link on this slide to it. We've got a useful link slide coming up here in a minute. And so I just can't, again, stress enough that these reference manuals are there for you to successfully deploy. It's got very detailed guidance material. Some of these are hundreds of pages long. And that's not stated to overwhelm you. It's stated to tell you the width and breadth and depth of each of these reference manuals. So use them when you're deploying as a best practice. Next. With that, I want to introduce Emmanuel Vivier from Safran.
Thanks a lot, Larry. Well, thank you. So now we will just speak just about the next step. So as you could see during Larry's presentation, there was a huge job that was just accomplished in the previous years, writing all these standards and making all this tremendous work. Now implementation will be a big step forward. It will be a big step for suppliers, but you know, it will be a big step for us OEMs as well. And so that's why for amongst all the strategy board of the AESQ, we decided to launch some specific strategy group dedicated to the deployment of this new standard. As it won't be a trivial move, as you can imagine, we wanted to make sure that everyone will be able to access to all the materials, to all the support that they could require during their implementation. And that's why what we asked to this team was really to ensure that all the OEMs and all the participants of the AESQ will deploy in a coherent way the AS13100 across both the subject matter of interest and across also the companies. So this group will consider what is the progress for each of them, and they will also consider what could be the difficulties that could be encountered by any of the team members, and to share as well what could be some successes and some best practices. So the idea is really how we will help each other during this deployment period to make sure that at the end we will have the best standard available for everyone, and that everything will be ready by the end of 2022, which is the target that we all decided to reach to implement this new standard. So now I suggest so you can, next, you can go to the next chart. So now I will just introduce Elizabeth Pace as the leader of this strategy group, and she will as the Supplier Quality Strategy Associate Director for Pratt & Whitney, and she will present to you all the great job that is performing so far currently within this strategy group.
Okay, thank you, Emmanuel. My name is Elizabeth Pace, and I am Supplier Quality Strategy for Pratt & Whitney, a Raytheon Technologies company, and I am the lead for the deployment team. In the middle of my presentation, we're also going to give some examples of member companies and their deployment strategies. So we will hear from Larry again, and then also Yuzam Khan, who's with Rolls-Royce. Next slide. So for the deployment status, we really wanted to kind of have a focus for this meeting on really what is AS13100, you know, what do we expect as far as expectations, the timeline, you know, really what are the companies that are committed to deployment, what are the benefits? You know, we've heard Barbara and Larry kind of go through a lot of that before. but just really wanted to show that all of the member companies are committed to deploying this out. We are committed to a December 31st date of 2022, and we're here to help, like Emmanuel had said. So I'm going to go through, what is AS13100 very high level, who are the companies that are committed to deployment, who is on the deployment team, and then what are those benefits. Then I'm going to dive into, what does it mean to be compliant? When we say that we expect you to be compliant, what is it that we're actually looking for? I'm going to give some examples of the member company timeline overview. We're going to pause for an opportunity so everyone can kind of see where everyone is in their journey, break for some member company examples. I did send out a survey in mid-August to kind of get a baseline of where everyone is in deployment, and I wanted to kind of show some of those results. And then we'll just do a recap and talk about the tools and next steps. And next slide. So AS13100, it is a standard that establishes supplemental requirements for 9100 and 9145 and applying to any organization receiving it as part of the purchase order or contractual document. It was released on March 1st, 2021, and we have a compliance date of December 31st, 2022. Really, we incorporated and leveraged the reference manuals that have been developed over the last few years by the AESQ and, aligned as member companies on flowdowns for our supply base. Next slide. Now, all of the member companies for the AESQ are committed to AS13100. GE, Pratt & Whitney, Rolls-Royce, Safran, Honeywell, MTU, GCAN, PCC, Howmet, and IHI. If you are a supplier to these companies, you will be seeing this flow to you in the next year and a half. Okay, the deployment strategy team is represented from all of those member companies, sometimes by multiple people. We have all worked together to make sure that, we are aligned in how we're going to deploy this out to you as the supply base. It's very important to us that we stay aligned because the biggest benefit to this is really having that common language and common approach for our suppliers. Next slide. And again, the benefits of collaboration you're going to see on the left-hand side in that red box. When Barbara had showed the slide back from the 2012 timeframe, there were multiple boxes with multiple requirements that were all different across all of the engine manufacturers. What we're doing now is aligning on those requirements so that what you're receiving from each of us is the same. It's in the same language. We are working over the next year and a half to remove any of those duplicate or redundant requirements. We build on existing aerospace industry standards where appropriate. We're leveraging the reference manuals, which you've seen over the last couple of years around the areas of, process control and DPRV as examples. We're all pushing together to set higher standards for quality. We adopt the best practices from across industry. If you read through those reference manuals, we give examples of how to implement within your company. The standards have all been written by industry leaders, those that are considered experts within their individual focus areas. And we're also, focused on acceleration of supplier quality capability improvement. We want to use common tools. We want to have common training. We want to align in all of those areas so that we make it easier for you as the supplier. Next slide. So now I'm going to break into a little bit of the timeline and expectations. So what do the member companies mean when they say we expect compliance to AS13100 by December 31st, 2022? Here I've listed out the activities. We are all, as member companies, performing the gap analysis to AS13100, utilizing a checklist that you can find on our AESQ webpage, referenced as AS or RM 13009. It is an Excel-based checklist, and you can go through paragraph by paragraph and build your gap analysis and gap closure plan, which could be completed by December 31st of 2022. We are asking that you complete the AS13100 requirements for training, which are online, including the AESQ Quality Foundation training class. And I have summed up in a slide at the end when we recap the trainings that are available. Provide on-the-job training to your employees for all the customer requirements and within your facilities. And then we're asking that you complete an annual audit report to summarize for your customers when they come in. The big burst here really is notify your customer of any gaps or exceptions. There may be areas where you might not be compliant for next year. You may not be compliant for December 31st, but we ask that you work with your member company and OEM to identify what those gaps are and document any exceptions and work towards your closure plans with your customer. Next slide. So the member companies created a supplier preparation milestone plan, and this is not etched in stone. This is really a guidance for, getting us to that end goal where we have AS13100 requirements now in effect. We've laid out those steps and what those expectations are. We've given everyone close to 2 years of notice for, implementation. And, we've sent out communications, both from the AESQ and then from our member companies. We've talked to the AS13100 trainings. We've, each of the member companies have actually developed plans for our own adoption and deployment. And you're going to see 2 of those focused on here today, Rolls-Royce and GE. We've done our internal stakeholder meetings on our plans and approaches for deployment, and we have asked each of the member companies to come to the deployment team with approvals from their member executives. Next slide. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to also use the Slido tool to do a poll in the middle of this. I think it's good for everyone to understand that we are early on in the deployment phase. We do have another 1.5 years, but it is, moving along quickly. So I'll turn over to Becky if you want to go through the poll.
So the Slido poll is open and it looks like people are starting to vote. So go ahead and enter your vote. If you can't see the Slido poll for some reason, feel free to type it into the chat. I see some people are already doing that, so that will give us some idea also. We have 30 votes in the poll so far, so we'll give it, a few more seconds here, give people a chance to read through it and enter their response. Right now, the lead is number 1. We're still trying to figure out what this means to my company, 66%. But 5 more seconds, everyone. It looks like the votes are still coming in. You can see the percentages are changing. So we have 60 votes right now, and it's still climbing, but still trying to figure out what this means to my company has 61%. Performing the gap analysis utilizing reference manual 13009 has 22%. Updating my procedures to close gaps has 14%. Conducting the quality foundation training with my employees, 2%. And conducting internal pre-audit also has 2%. So thank you everyone for supporting the poll.
Okay, so as Becky just said, I think we finished with 62%, which our company is still trying to figure out what this means to my company. And that is okay, right? We have another 1.25 years, and when I go to the next slide, I'm going to show you where the member companies are within their deployment plans. And I think a lot of the companies that have joined the call today are really just interested in finding out, you know, what does this mean to my company? So Becky, if you go to the next slide. So the deployment team, as I had said before, is represented by all the member companies, and we have all committed to this Milestone 7, which is full AS13100 compliance by the supply base by December 31st of 2022. And you will see that we're all on different phases of our journey as well. Some are still completing the gap analysis. Some are still looking to get approvals for their project plans and have their member executive buy into their deployment plans. And some have already started to flow out AS13100 to the supply base within their internal documents. So again, we're allowing for flexibility. We're trying to get upfront. We're trying to work with you as our supply base to make sure that we're all aligned in, you know, just meeting that milestone 7. We are all here to help and address concerns. So please feel free to reach out to your member companies. Now, if we go to the next slide, we are going to break into 2 examples of member companies and their milestone plans. So I'd like to turn over to Uzam Khan, who is going to speak for Rolls-Royce.
Hello, everybody. It's a real pleasure to speak with you. I'm the new boy on the team. So for many years, I've heard my colleagues from Rolls-Royce talk about AESQ. So I'm really pleased to join the team at AESQ. We talk a lot about standards, but interestingly, what hits me most is actually the behavior. So you've heard the word collaboration a lot already, and really that's what this is about. So I think it's in that spirit that we'll make real strides forward, not just in the mechanics of what the standards are. Next slide, please. That's me. Keep going. Sorry, Becky. Sorry. So I guess one of the benefits of standardization is we get to recycle all the same graphics. So this is our internal slide. It's very much about how we position Sabre 3 as was to what is now Sabre 4. So Sabre 4 is our supplier requirements. It became live in August in the footsteps of AS13100, which went live earlier in the year. I guess the key message is that there's a big step change from Sabre to Sabre 4 in that we are basing Sabre 4 pretty much on AS13100. So the top graphic there really is, in addition to Sabre 3, we've incorporated some new requirements that are other engine manufacturers had. So things like there was more of an emphasis in their requirements around training, around human factors. So clearly they're embedded now into AS13100. So that becomes a requirement for Rolls-Royce and therefore part of Sabre 4. Just as a bit of a note, MRO is going to be slightly different. So if you're an MRO, you're still following Sabre 3, and the MRO team in Rolls-Royce will come up with their standard shortly. So the bottom pyramid is really where we are. Sabre 3, largely specific to Rolls-Royce. Sabre 4, international standards, as well as AS13100. There are some specifics to us, and I appreciate in the comments that the challenges around, why do the primes have their own. I guess it's a journey of convergence amongst us. This is a big step forward in that journey, but this isn't the end of that journey. So I'm sure as we continue to talk to you and collaborate, we will consolidate more and more. But some of the things that are in Sabre 4 that are not in AS13100 include actually a nod to the way that AS13100 is constructed and that Larry pointed out. So Sabre 3 was a one-size-fits-all. So in Sabre 4, we actually have customizable supply types. So depending on the nature of the supply, you can choose what's required. We also have some specific product safety awareness because clearly in the industry that we're in, it's massively important. So we require that the suppliers conduct that specific awareness. Cybersecurity is something that's additional. And also, as you'll have heard, Zero Defects, it's really our flagship improvement program. We've been running for 5 years now. So there's a requirement that our suppliers have a strategy and plan, not just to improve, but to get to zero defects. So we appreciate that is separate. And I guess, as I said, as we carry on down this journey, there will be conversations around whether some of those things can be adapted wider. If we move to the next slide, please, Becky. Okay, so it does mean that there is whilst there's an addition of the AS standard, there's a rationalization in Sabre 4. So it is halved in size of the document that we have. We've tried to also reduce the must-dos, the shells, so they're reduced by 40% or so. And again, a bit of repetition about what I've said, that it's pretty much AS13100. Next slide, Becky. So this is an internal slide that we use as to where we've got to, but it moves into the supplier realm. So far, sort of 2/3 into the slide, we've released Sabre 4. We've sent the notice of our suppliers, not just to inform them of the release, but also to guide them towards specific Sabre 4 training, which is over and above the AESQ requirements. So as has been said with previous speakers, the journey now is to understand, for the suppliers, understand the requirements of AS13100, the limited Sabre 4 requirements, we hope, do your gap analysis and come up with your plan. And internally, as much as possible, I do point to AESQ as the place to go first rather than come to Rolls-Royce. So I think, more and more we want our supply base to use the resources that AESQ has to offer, because it will drive standardization and one common message. Of course, we're here to help you, but more and more working with the AESQ and the SAE team, it is how can we provide you with as much support as possible through that forum, rather than come to us or probably to the other primes as well. It takes the load off us, but it also drives standardization. Next slide, please, Becky. And part of that is the training that's provided. So for Sabre 4, we have an internal awareness course. We could possibly put it for external use, but primarily it's internal. So what we do ask for Sabre 4 is to conduct a 4-hour training done by a third party that takes you into the things that I've just mentioned that are different from AS13100. Otherwise, the rest is the standard AS13100 requirement. So the exact overview that's on the website, the online training, and then the more detailed training that's coming down the line. So as we've said, relatively early in all of our journeys, we appreciate, but time will run out pretty quickly. So the sooner we can get our heads around what's required and do the gap analysis. As has been mentioned in the chat, a lot of this is not new stuff. So hopefully it will be small gaps that you have to close from now to the end of next year. I think that's me as a quick overview. Hand you over to Larry.
Okay. Next, please. So let me first say that, I've gotten feedback today as well as previously that if the intent is to simplify and reduce, why is GE's requirements growing? I'll preface that by saying that when I show you a few slides later, hopefully you'll be able to appreciate that our S1000 document did grow in size, but it was to accommodate today's requirements and future state requirements. And at the end of 2022, the current state will go away and we'll only be left with a 50% reduction in number of pages and requirements. So this slide and the slides that I'm going to show today really focus on how GE deployed the standard and how GE made specific references to places in our document that are required by the standard, such as AS13100 says, as required by customer, as directed by customer. Anywhere there was a customer reference in AS13100, we put a place in our document that stated how that would be satisfied or what the process would be. Next. So this gives you a cover page of our S1000 that has been published and has been launched April 1st that incorporates AS13100. So what we did was take the existing requirements prior to April and called that core document Part A. So the existing requirements that were already in place are still the existing requirements. And then we added a core document Part B, which you'll see aligns with the AS9100 numbering and the 13100 numbering. And we also highlighted in bold the things that are still in GE's requirements, and they are minimal. Mostly aligned with our Appendix A, which is non-conforming material and the use of our electronic tool. So if you take away the Appendix A and the non-conformance processing requirements, we only have about 5 or 6 pages of requirements. So hopefully you can appreciate. So what we did was core document Part A says you got to meet now. Core document Part B says you have to meet no later than the end of next year. If a supplier is already ready to meet Part B, then obviously core Part A is non-existent because the things that are in A that are left over are in B. Next. And we did the same thing with S1002 for our characteristic accountability. Part A and Part B, and then Part B, we have an existing, robust, viable first article process. That is not changing. So that is Section 2 of the Part B requirement future state. But what we did add was a Section 1 related just to PPAP deliverables and using our electronic tool to accomplish both the first article inspection and the PPAP deliverable. And then the other elements are carries over from S1002. We tried to lean as much as we can on AS9102, but knowing that we have a robust electronic tool, some of the functionality of that tool is a little different than 9102. So obviously some of those requirements will stay in place because we see the value and the goodness from that. Next. And again, the yellow highlight is just to highlight some of the changes and some of the exceptions to the 13100. 13100 record retention, we pretty much are aligned other than instead of 40 years, GE's internal requirements is life of program. Next. And then just to highlight a couple other examples, in our document, we state that ECAV shall be used to request approval for alternate inspection because that's one of the things in the standard that says use approval process required by customer. So again, we felt obligated to state in our document how that request and approval would happen. And then this was one of the significant changes for us is rolling out 9145 to start with, and then building the infrastructure and the process for handling PPAP and APQP approvals. And so we have a defined process for our suppliers, and we have a recipe for them to meet that. Next. A number of useful links, as we mentioned earlier. You can see on here the zero defects link that we talked about. Everything is on the AESQ website, but here's some individual links within that site. And the only thing I did not mention was, I think I said in passing, once we get to January 1st, 2023, GE will have a reduction of nearly 50% of shalls and 50% of pages. And we also, I didn't put on there the deployment plan. We have regular touch points with our suppliers. We have quarterly supplier newsletters. We have quarterly supplier broadcast calls. This has been a recurring theme well before publication. We were announcing and teasing and throwing out information as the Draft documents were being prepared. So our supply base has been communicated with regularly, and where they will continue to be all the way up to, we don't plan on this being a supplier you shall. We plan on this being a partnership and trying to stay in touch with our supply base to make sure that it is successful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Next slide. So as I have mentioned earlier, we did send out a survey initially on August 13th, 2021, and again in September. We have received 136 responses to date. It has not been closed out, and I would suggest, going in there and taking a few minutes to complete the survey. What we're looking to do is really create a baseline for deployment and see where there's areas where we can help, where we can put out additional trainings or webcasts. And the deployment team does, or at least members of the deployment team do review all of the responses that are in there. So the next couple slides are really from the survey. And I'll show where we've kind of put some slides into either my presentation or others, or we've brought in other presentations because it's things that we've been asked for. So next slide. So one of the questions that I asked was more of a perception, and where do you see, or how large of a gap do you see AS13100 secured operating procedures? And I'll say more than 50% is in that 6 to 12 month range, where you believe that there will need to be changes that will take place. I will highly advise, please go to the website, pull down RM 13009, complete the gap analysis tool, identify those areas of focus that you will need to have. And then when we send out the survey the next time, it'll be interesting to see how that changes. Next slide. So another question that we asked is really, where do you have areas of concern that you would like some help with? And, at the top, we have APQP and AS9145, really around, the ability to kind of meet those requirements as they're being flown to us. I will say that Dr. Ian Riggs has held a webinar already in September and does have plans to do more. We do have the reference manuals as well, which give examples and, more on the how-tos. And then there will be additional online training that will be coming out. The second item there is human factors. And we do have Catherine coming to speak to what her subject matter interest group has been working on for human factors as well. And as we go along, we're going to look at each of these areas to make sure that everyone is prepared and has the right materials to help them along their deployment. Next slide. So I did have multiple people ask for additional training that's more accessible. And I'll just reiterate, we're going to be focusing on additional webinars that may apply to the requirements and the methods of implementation. We will be putting those dates out both on LinkedIn and then also on the AESQ website. And we do send out periodic communications, which will point to those. Online training for APQP, PPAP, again, really looking through those reference manuals and listing out kind of those how-tos in the ways of compliance. And then also, we've been asked about training in other languages. We are looking into that right now and do have plans, or will be making plans for that in the future. We have 2 trainers currently right now, and we would like to expand on that. Next slide. So multiple people also asked, could you please share the experience of other suppliers as they go through the journey of deployment? So we do have Tana, who's going to present to GKN and their plan for deployment across all 8 of their business units, which is global. Next slide. Okay, and this is really just an opportunity to kind of recap. I have listed out what our website is and where you can find a lot of these resources. Each of us have kind of talked to multiple items here, you know, whether it's the quality foundation training, the transition milestone plan, FAQs, breakouts of the subject matter interest groups, and the reference manuals can all be found on our webpage. I highly encourage everyone to go and look at that RM 13009 gap analysis checklist and identify those areas where you may need a little more help and reach out to us, either through the survey or through the connections through the website. Again, Dr. Riggs had done a webinar for APOP PPAP in the middle of September, and we will have some upcoming webinars for other focus areas that will be upcoming. Next slide. So these are the 3 required training areas that we have. There is the DPRV, which has been a requirement since 2015. We have the AESQ approved AS13100 requirements course, and then the AESQ Quality Foundations course. And all of this can be found on our webpage as well. Next slide. So following this session, we will also be hosting a virtual question and answer event. It will be Wednesday, October 27th at 9 a.m., which is and then Tuesday, October 26th at 8 p.m., which is the Eastern Standard Time. This will be an opportunity for questions, but we do ask that you please watch the video that is out on the webpage prior to attending. And that is what I had for the deployment team. I will turn over to Becky for the break.
We're going to take a 15-minute break, everyone. We ask everyone to rejoin us in 15 minutes. Please don't drop off. Just put yourselves on mute. Thank you. So welcome back, everyone. I will introduce our next speaker, which is Catherine Katarina Graca. She's Supplier Management Systems Coordinator at Safran Aircraft Engines. And Catherine is going to talk to us about Reference Manual 13010 on human factors and the subject matter interest group. So welcome, Catherine. I think you'll need to unmute yourself.
Yes, sorry, I am mute, yes. Thanks, Vicky. Welcome, everyone. So, yes, I'm Catherine Katarina. I'm leading the subject matter interest group, what we call SMIC. You will see next in the presentation. Of course, you know that human factors are becoming a key element in aerospace industry. During last supplier forum in April, I presented the human factor requirement in quite detail, and also what we had in our RM 13010. But next, please, Becky. But today, I will just do a quick reminder and go more in detail on what we're working on now. So, of course, you remember that we had some requirement about the QMS, the leadership. Indeed, the top management is a key element in human factor deployment. And I will come back to that later on. Of course, if we want leadership, first of all, we need to have a human factor policy. And human factor policy can be alone or can be part of the quality policy. But to go with all that, we need to have a communication plan, but more than that, human factor awareness and training. So that's why we have tried to work on that first manual RM 13010. But if you need more information you don't find in that manual, of course, the group is ready to update it. So please let us know and send me emails and we will work on it. Next, please. So once again, I wanted to emphasize that human factor leadership and policy. This is a slide I presented during last human factor presentation in April. I wanted to emphasize that if you are concerned in that human factor, first you need to work on that two items. They are really key elements. Next, please. More than that, of course, you have some elements. The training, first of all, I talked about it previously. It's very important to have an incident reporting process. Of course, it needs to be based on open reporting culture. Open reporting culture is also a key element of the human factor initiative. Then your human factor investigation process needs to be challenged. It is very important to understand what's behind human errors. Operators are not always there to be blamed. Most of the time, when you perform really a big root cause analysis, and we had some at Safran recently, you find that we have some gaps in the organization, in the communication, maybe within some tools, and we really need to work on those aspects. So investigation and organization is a key point. Of course, as a project, we always need to follow human factor performance and improvement. So you need to follow action plan, KPIs, and have report to VPs and of course to managers in regular basis. Next. Thank you, Becky. So that's why after that supplier forum, after April 2021, we have launched a new working group called SMIC, so the Subject Matter Interest Group, and I will talk about this specific. Next, please. So the SMIC groups are part of our deployment strategy. As you have seen previously with Liz, we have SMIC groups on all subject matters. And within our group, we really want to promote the effective deployment on each subject. Of course, we are accountable for the requirements which are in AS13100, but of course, we won't modify it right now. Next, please. With a group of experts, we really want to gather and share practices because we are also concerned by AS13100 deployment, and we need to train our colleagues the supply base. So that's why we have decided to work on webinars and more awareness material, and maybe also you will see some communication kit in order for you to use them if you want. Next, please. Here's the team. I wanted to show you the team. So you maybe you know some of them. You have Chris Craig from Rolls-Royce, Ludovic Chevet from Airbus. So Airbus is also part of AS13100 deployment. Beata I don't know very well her name, Tarkson from MTU. Loïc Specia and Yusuf Ali Madarbukus from Safran Aircraft Engine. Nick Watling from Pratt & Whitney. Richard Bolingbroke from PCC. And Brandon Richards from GE. So we meet every 2 or 3 weeks, but you can see that our group is quite interesting, and we have been sharing all our best practices, and soon we will make them available to you. Next, please, Becky. So what have we been doing? Next, please. So as
Catherine, we can't hear you. Is your microphone off?
yes. Sorry, maybe so we have worked on, as you can see, some communication kit within our organization, and you have some example on the left side. We have some awareness kit to empower leaders and teams. We have forwarded some of it to some suppliers who have asked, but soon we will put them on the website. Of course, we have some best practices company-wide, and also some best practices and deployment at some suppliers. So the objective, you understand, is to make this to you available. Next, please. So with all that, we have started preparing a dedicated presentation on policy and human factor leadership because we really want to emphasize that. We will also have detailed examples and feedbacks from our companies and an example of human factor deployment at some suppliers. Next, please. So because we are ready to share that with you, we have scheduled 2 webinars, and you will be able to register. I'll see with Becky the way you will register. So the first one is Friday, November the 19th So it will be 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Paris time and 4 p.m., 6 p.m. Tokyo time. So Asia and maybe a part of Europe will be able to join. And the second one is Thursday, November the 25th, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Paris time, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. New York time. If we need to make more, we will add some more, but we wanted to start with these 2 dates. So we will share, and of course, we are waiting for your feedbacks and let us know if it suits you. So just let us know. You have the Q&A session too. So please give us a feedback on that. Thank you very much. Now I will give the slide or the microphone maybe to Tina Olson from GKN Aerospace. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Catherine. We can go to the next slide, Becky, please. So hi, everyone. So I'm here today to give you an insight of what we are doing to deploy the AS13100 in GKN Aerospace. Next. But let's start with a short introduction of who I am. So my name is Tina Olson, and if you ask my daughter, I have a weird accent. The easy explanation is that I have a Finnish and Swedish background, been in US since 2007. 30 years ago, I fell in love. I fell in love with quality. And I have had different quality roles since then in automotive, the mining industry, the steel industry, and also now in the aerospace. My role today is within GKN Aerospace. I can continue with my passion for quality. And I'm leading the quality systems for the engine sites. I support all the engine sites and making sure that we have integrated to the global standards, and now then leading our way to the deployment of AS13100. And I must say that this assignment that we have now, I am even more in love with quality now, because this is the first time I see so much of human touch in a standard that I've ever seen before. Great progress when you look at the standards. Next, please. Just a couple of short slides about GKN Aerospace. So this is a global business, and the business is divided in 3 core markets: civil, engines, and defense. Next, please. And as you can see, we are spread across the world. We have 41 sites. There are manufacturing sites, repair stations or MROs. We have engineering offices. We have technical centers, you name it. And we are actually in 13 different countries, approximately 15,000 employees, and our sales are around £3 billion. As mentioned, I represent the business lines engines, but we are here to talk about AS13100. So let's get into it. Next, please. So when we knew about the standard coming pretty early, but until we saw this in front of us, we realized we need to take certain steps pretty quickly in order to be ready by the end of 2022. So no proper project management tool was introduced from the get-go. We just had to get started. So I will go through each and one of these steps, and some of them are already completed, some of them are in works, and some of them are in the plans. Next, please. The first step for me personally, I had to get involved in AESQ, especially the deployment strategy group of AS13100 that you can see on the left-hand side of this slide. The team or the group had already started when I joined, but that didn't matter. I was quickly introduced what was expected and how to work in this group. The objectives were already set, and it clearly states that we want to ensure homogeneous and practical deployment of the standard. And that is a very important word for me, practical. Let's not make a PowerPoint slide. This is practical deployment of the standard. Very important. We also share difficulties, challenges, and of course, best practices that has already been mentioned from the earlier speakers. I personally love the preparation milestone plan that you can see on the slide as well, created by AESQ. In GKN, we have used that as a baseline for our milestone plan. In this deployment strategy group, we have also a dashboard to make sure that we are all on the same path and helping each other to be on the same journey and share our experience. Next, please. So, as mentioned earlier, we have several sites across the business lines, civil, engines, and defense. So we needed to understand what businesses, what sites will be affected by AS13100. That was not all 41 sites. One of the challenges from the get-go was the absence of one common QMS for all sites. We have different QMSs. They have their own certificates, AS9100 certificate. Another challenge was that all the sites, QMSs, they have different level of maturity and complexity. The reason for mentioning that, what does it mean if they have different maturity and complexity, is when we are trying to find the commonalities to close any identified gaps with one way of doing it, one solution. We identified 11 sites that will be affected. And this was done by communication and discussions with our program and commercial functions. From these 11 sites, we then ended up with 8 assessments. And the reason for that is because some of the sites do have a multi-site search. So 8 assessments was required to have their assessments done. Next, please. Before we even started with the assignment to do the assessment, we had to make sure everyone had access to the standard itself. It seems pretty obvious, but with several QMSs, with several maturity, we were not sure how they handle the subscription of standards. This is now solved, and we all have access to the standard through a subscription. The next step then was, of course, to make sure that we invite all the affected sites done remotely. And we went through the standard together. Some of the sites already knew a lot about the standard. They were part of the forum that took place in April. So they had a lot of knowledge already. But it was more of a session to understand what is actually required, what is expected from us, how can we work together and answer any open questions we might have had. We created a placeholder for all the information we would like to share with each other. And we had a SharePoint site where we can go in and check others' work, gap assessment, etc. We also have all the important links to the AESQ webpage. Next, please. Also in the prep phase, it's important to communicate to the rest of the organization. and to all the leadership teams, to the program organization, of course. And I have had the opportunity and occasions to present in the engine leadership team several times about the standard itself. What is expected? We need your support. We need the commitment from you. The communication within the organization is vital. We have to have the awareness. We have to have the knowledge in order to have the support and commitment on this journey and be successful by the end of 2022. Next, please. So when the preparation was completed, we submitted the compliance assessment file together with the reference manual. There is nothing else the sites needed. This is all they need to start their assessment. I could see some attempts to create their own assessment tools, but that was absolutely unnecessary. You have it all there. Just send it out. We also gave the sites a deadline, making sure that, hey, if we are going to be successful, we have to put some deadlines, milestones. Have your assessments done by this date. For the sites in GKN, we had mid-August. We could see that some of the assessment came back pretty early. Some of them struggled a bit, yes, but then we actually asked the ones who were done, hey, go and help the other sites and show and share your experience. Very successful, and it was so much easier, and in that way we could also spread the information and awareness even more about the standard. The result you see in the middle of it, so it's 8 sites and they look different. The reason for they looking different is what I mentioned before. We have different levels of maturity, complexity, and the size of the sites as well, and the scope of the QMS, of course. Some of the lessons learned that I would like to share with you that spread the awareness of the standard as much as possible, makes it easier when you do the assessment. Don't put the assessment to a quality functions only. We didn't do that. We made sure use cross-functional teams. The standard is not about a quality manager's tasks only. And don't overcomplicate the assessment. As I mentioned, there were some attempts trying to figure out how can we make a smart assessment tool. No need. Use the tools given by AESQ, the file, and the reference manual, and focus on the supplemental requirements. They are easy to find because they are in the tool itself, and they are also very clearly identified in the standard. There are approximately 110 supplemental requirements, if I counted them right. If I'm wrong, please let me know. And other lessons learned, help each other. Please, one is finished, go and help the other. And if you have global functions, which we have in GKN, we made sure to incorporate them into the assessments as well. You may have engineering or procurement. Make sure they are part of the assessment. And last but not least, document objective evidence where you already assessed yourself as green. That was our recommendation in GKN. Why? Because when you go back and reassess or revisit your assessment, you will understand, why did I put the green there? Oh, this is what I meant. Please, objective evidence, and it's easy to follow up on. Next, please. So when all the assessments, 8 of them, were completed, plans to close the identified gaps were created with what, how, by whom, and when. So we received 8 plans, but our ambition is to create one common compliance plan for GKN Aerospace. Next, please. So as we speak, the assessments and the plans are being reviewed in order to identify commonalities. Why inventing the wheel several times if we can share best practices and also agree on one solution how to close a gap? The approach now is to have one plan, and we will formalize this into a proper project management tool in order to measure progress of it. The common gaps will then be assigned to work groups or task groups to work on this common solution for all of us. And then we execute the plans together. Next, please. This is an example from one of the sites in Engines. They have already now prepared their current QMS by adding on the AS13100 into the platform or software they are using for their QMS. They pointed out where the supplemental requirements will belong and also appointed process owners for each and one of them. So their framework is already created. Next, please. So one very important part of a successful deployment is the knowledge of what is actually required. Without knowing that, we don't know where to go. So best way of that is, of course, to be trained. We noticed early on the different levels of training depending on your role in the organization. So make sure that some of the training is recommended, some is required depending on your role in the organization. For us, for example, when there are words like quality leader, who is a quality leader? We have different definitions of roles in our organization. We are quality system managers, there are QA auditors, there are configuration quality managers, etc., etc. Are they all quality leaders? So make sure to identify who goes through what kind of training. Next, please. This is the biggest challenge as we have experienced in GKN, and that is the flow down to our suppliers. There is a table in the standard that is very clear when it comes to applicability, so we know who will be affected of what clauses in the standard. We already took the poll earlier today, but we need to make sure that we can categorize those suppliers we have today and make sure who will be affected by what. We share some of the suppliers today with different sites in GKN. So here we need to understand what kind of tools or mechanisms are the different sites in GKN using to flow down their requirements. As mentioned, we have different QMSs at this point. We have different way of flowing down. We have different maturity. So we have to come to one way of doing this. And we need to make sure that we start communicating with our suppliers. And we already know that AESQ has done a great job with the communication to the entire supply chain. But now it's time for us to take over and take that to our suppliers, start collaborating with them, and then, of course, measure the progress together. How far are we into the deployment of the standard? Next, please. So within GKN, we have started to measure our own progress. On a monthly basis, we sit with the leadership team, and they have been asking us to have some kind of progress report. So this is the progress report you see on the slide, where we'll actually make sure that we follow each and one of the tasks. The first two are already completed. That is the compliance assessment and then the compliance plan for each site. Then we will then follow how well we are progressing when it comes to the different chapters of the standard, A, B, and C. Then we have added on a couple of tasks that we need to monitor a little bit closely, and that is the training. Do we make sure that all necessary training has been provided to the organization and the different roles that we have identified? Another task that we need to monitor closely is the flow down to our suppliers. How have we done that? How well are we on that road? And then, of course, the pre-audit. As you know, that in next year, we will have to make sure that we can audit all the sites when they start getting closer to the end of the implementation of AS 13100. Next, please. And last but not least, we have to have a roadmap, making sure we don't fall off the wagon here. We know that the target is 31st of December 2022, and we have already started the journey. As you know, we are already in October, and this is the month where we are supposed to have the one plan together from the 8 assessments. And that's my presentation. Thank you. And now I'll turn over to Jun Sakai, Chief Engineer at IHI Corporation, talk about AESQ and how to get involved.
Thank you, Tanya-san. I'm Jun Sakai from IHI Corporation in Japan. And it is now almost 2 a.m. in Tokyo. So if some of you are attending from the same or similar time zone, then thank you for staying connected in very late in the evening. And it is equally appreciated to all attendees from around the world for staying online and keep listening to the presentations. And in this session, I'd like to show you around how to get involved in the activities in AESQ as a help for the deployment of AS13100 standard in your quality management system. So please go to next page. Okay, and so since AS13100 has been published in March this year, as we discussed today, the deployment of the standard by the end of the next year became everyone's focus. And also, the uniform progress of the deployment throughout entire OEM and supply chain is another thing that we think it is important. To do so, the key is to have more and more interaction between OEMs and supply chain. And AESQ provides many kind of ways to interact as shown in this slide. Communication support is to provide information which might be useful for you. That could be monthly e-newsletters, SNS like LinkedIn, or supplier forum or webinar events. And taking a training course should help you by getting your resource trained. And for the deployment, you can visit the community of practice. Then you can have a chance to have lessons learned and best practices shared with the subject matter experts. And all of these can be started with a quite simple step. Just click the menu in AESQ website. Please go to the next page. So this is a very simple first step. please try AESQ homepage and click Get Involved menu under the Membership tab. And also, you may want to remember there are different tabs in the top menu bar, such as Activities tab for training or subject matter interest group, or Events tab for Supplier Forum, etc., which I will explain in the later slides. Please go to next slide. And when you enter the Get Involved page, you can find the different options. You can sign up to receive AESQ newsletter, and becoming an AESQ member is for the corporate level membership. Or you can join in SAE G22 Standards Writing Committee as an individual. Next slide, please. And if you sign up online to receive the newsletter, you will receive the e-newsletter monthly, and you can learn about the latest activities in AESQ. Next slide, please. And for the corporate membership, there is 2 membership levels. One is AESQ Strategy Group member that is specified in the original AESQ Charter and provides support and guidance to entire AESQ activities. The other is AESQ member, which is open to the organization engaged in the Aero engine supply chain, who can provide resources and representation of senior leader or subject matter experts. Again, you can send application online. Next slide, please. And in addition, from other menu in the homepage, you will be able to find AESQ events such as Supplier Forum or webinar session, subject matter interest group webinar, take a training course, and so on. Next slide, please. And I hope everyone agrees that Supplier Forum is a good twice-a-year event for the interaction. This time, video recording and the presentation will be online on the AESQ homepage in a week or so. Then there will be a question and answer session on 27th October, 9 a.m. in Japan time for the ease of attendance from Asia and Pacific region. Next slide, please. And also, any feedback from you by email will be greatly appreciated. Next slide, please. And lastly, for the AS13100 deployment activities, AESQ would like to encourage a lot of people to join in community of practice. In the current homepage, you can find the list of subject matter interest group in the interest group page under the activities menu. And each subject matter interest group page is prepared for each community of practice. And you can find the latest information regarding the subject and the webinar event, contact information, and so on. Growth of these pages could represent how it is uniformly progressing the deployment activities throughout the supply chain. So we hope it will be growing as we work together. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you. And I'll pass to Mr. Jim Wilson from Pratt & Whitney.
So Jim, I think you need to unmute yourself. Jim Wilson, it's time to do the summary and questions, and we're going to pull the questions from the chat feature. Jim, if you're able to unmute. So I'll get this started here while Jim's handling his, there you go.
I unmuted my phone, but not on the thing. Sorry about that. I got two different unmutes to do. All right.
You're good.
I'm good. We've been monitoring the questions, or I've been monitoring the questions and grouping them as they've been going along. For any of you that have been watching what's been going on, you actually see a lot of answers to the questions active by the AESQ members. So a significant number of the questions have already been answered by the member that was probably the best person to respond to that. So what I've done is I've grouped some of the questions together into subjects that I seem to be multiple people that might have interest or maybe that want a little bit more information. I would think the first question is on distributors. There's a number of individuals that have questioned the definition of distributors. It may be something new in the industry, the fact that distributors with a capital D are different than those that distribute parts that are possibly made to print. Questions we have, and I think maybe Larry, if you want this one, AS13100 seems to suggest that through the definition for a distributor in Table 2, that AS9100 is needed for distributors supplying make-to-print parts. Is this correct? The second question was, please, can you clarify the distributor quality approval requirements again? So that's the same subject. If a distributor also provides make-to-print parts, what certification requirements are? So there's a little bit of confusion. Maybe we should go over the difference between a distributor and somebody distributing make-to-print parts.
Yeah, so I had checked with our internal subject matter expert on system approvals and provided the response in the chat earlier that I can summarize again. The bottom line is a distributor obviously is getting a part that is make to print from another manufacturer and selling that part. And there's a pedigree for that distributor that is fundamentally different than a manufacturer. And thus, if a manufacturer is obviously required to be AS9100, a distributor is required to be AS9120. So if a source is acting as both entities within the same organization, I would expect them to have both certifications because the quality system requirements are fundamentally different between the two. 9100 will never get you to the full 9120 recipe, is basically what I'm saying.
So distributors 9120, and anybody distributing at least one make-to-print part, unfortunately, becomes a Type 1 make-to-print supplier and has to be AS9100 certified. Just on an additional note, anybody that does business with Pratt & Whitney, our AESQ R1 requirement has had that separate distributor definition for years. So if you want to see more information about how that's been applied, go right there. Okay, I got to ask this one of the team. I don't think there's anybody that's particularly designated for this, but it's an interesting question. I think it's probably on the minds of a lot of suppliers. What kind of guarantee do suppliers have that the requirements of AS13100 will remain harmonized? This is our company's biggest concern. We've seen this with FAI requirements for AS9102. When it was first released, everybody united behind the standard, but over time, everyone started adding their own supplemental requirements. And now every single customer wants their FAIs a little different than everybody else's. What will keep the member companies from doing the same thing with AS13100? I invite anyone to jump in.
So this is Larry. I'll start by saying, I'll repeat what I said earlier in my presentation, that GE is going to have some fundamental differences to 9120. Our electronic application has some additional rigor and error proofing in it that is different than 9120. So we will never be completely aligned with 9120, but we need it in principle. As far as the commitment, there are no guarantees in life, but the 10 member companies are joined at the hip with pushing the standard out, and I don't see any appetite to go back to where we were.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Not all of the member companies were participating on the 9102 writing of that standard, but definitely all the companies are committed and have been working for years on creating AS 13100. So it's a slightly different animal than 9102, but the concern is obviously valid that we will need to try as much as possible, and we will continue our efforts at the AESQ to continue to drive in the same direction. Hopefully we make it.
This is Barbara Negroe. I can answer a little bit of that too. And I echo what you both said. I mean, as of right now, we're continuing to try to standardize as much as possible and continue to add and consolidate those specification requirements in these specifications. So we're not trying to go the other direction. We're trying to go in the consolidation direction. You know, you have our commitment. And I think as we move forward, we have to hold each other accountable to that commitment and truly understand if there are differences, is it something we can all agree to and incorporate versus deviate? So I think we've made a great start, and you know, we commit to continue to focus on that.
All right, good stuff. All right, Becky, how are we doing for time?
Okay, take a few more questions.
Okay. Actually, one just came up, and it's something I know that's been discussed by our suppliers. The compliance route is unclear. It is very likely that there will be multiple requests for 13100 compliance. This means that there will be multiple interfaces to various customers, causing duplication and probably contradiction in responses. Who will confirm or approve an organization is compliant, as gaps may be subjective and acceptable to some OEMs and not to others? Helen, maybe? Still there? I know Helen because we've been dealing with this issue for about 7 years now. All right, I guess I can go ahead. Okay, the basis for 13100 compliance is mostly a self-evaluation. The idea of aligning our requirements into a single document means that it should simplify the activity of auditing our suppliers. If you're, you know, if 50% of your requirements for, let's say 80% of your requirements for Pratt & Whitney are in AS 13100, we can be pretty sure that those are going to be the same for GE and the same for Rolls and of the other members. The goal of the team that was working on this subject was to try and reduce the amount of customer audits that are coming into you as suppliers. I'm sure there's some suppliers out there that just love to see their customers coming in to do another quality audit, but really we want to try and minimize that as possible. The idea of the annual audit, internal audit report, you'll see that described in AS 13100. This is a comprehensive report of all of the activities that you've undertaken during the year to self-audit yourself, to deal with customer audits, or still will be customer audits, or regulatory audits. Whatever has happened during that year should go into this report. And at a high level that you can share it with each one of your customers. It's going to be tough maybe, but the idea is that if the annual audit report is comprehensive enough, and let's say you're a supplier to Pratt & Whitney and you're a relatively low-risk supplier, we may be able to use the fact that, you know, the internal audit report looks good. We don't think we need to come in and do an audit this year. And that's the hope, that eventually once those reports start getting to the level that they really need to, that the OEMs will maybe be able to start using it in their risk analysis of which suppliers are going to get an on-site, which suppliers are going to get a mail-in audit, and which suppliers are just going to be ignored in general. So there is no certification planned for AS 13100. You're not going to get a plaque on the wall like you do for 9100, but the way to ensure compliance will be through an internal audit, and then, of course, it may once in a while be added. An added customer audit will be added to the requirement too. Does anybody else have anything to say? All right. Mon ami Catherine. Question on Part 21 and Part 145 suppliers will soon be reissued with SMS as a requirement for those approved. I'm assuming that this will more than meet the human factors requirements here. And then there's a couple of other ones that, you know, they basically, PFMEA mandates no failure to be assigned due to operator error. How does human factors figure in this, in AS 13100? And a couple of comments saying that, yes, for years we have not accepted operator error as a root cause. And just a statement that, you know, in the maintenance organizations, which is the Part 145, but human factors has been used on a regular basis, but of course it hasn't been used in manufacturing so much, where poka-yoke and mistake proofing is really the goal. How is AS 13100 going to change that?
Oh, okay. So several questions. So I won't speak about part 145 because MRO is not in the scope of AS 13100, as mentioned previously by, I think, Larry. But of course, it's the same kind of system we really want to have for a new part. We don't want to have only poka-yoke. Of course, poka-yoke are useful, but we really want, as I mentioned before, to investigate and understand the real root cause and maybe the latent errors that, you know, the latent errors in the reason model, the latent errors of a human error. And how will it change? It changes because during your assessment, you need to show your QMS. You need what's in your QMS. You need to show how you are the leaders and the manager are leading the teams and are changing the culture. So all these elements will be the proof of changing the culture in manufacturing, but not only in manufacturing, of course, because we have also human errors in offices. We can see also more than that human errors, for example, in health and safety. And concerning the question on PFMEA, and I would say AD, we have taken action to work with the PFMEA group and the AD group. So the two groups will meet together in order to give some solution. So it's something we have discussed already in our group. But this part, working with the group will start end of the year or beginning of next year. Does it answer to all the question, or I missed some? Or?
Jim, this is Khan. I was just wondering if I could just add to that. Sorry. So I guess the way I'd respond is that often the operator error tends to be the fifth why, but really what we're saying is that isn't the last. You've got to find out why did the operator create the error, and that gets into environmental conditions that are created. So just really just going a bit further, I think. And just as an example, in one of our sites has been doing human factors just culture for a few years. I mean, their data shows that something like 30 to 50% of defects and errors have a human factor contribution. So we're never going to get to zero defects without really understanding it. The point is it's a blind spot for most of us in our industry. And that's what, to Katrine's presentation, that's what we need to learn about more.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There are still questions coming in, but I have one last question. Jun-san, can G22 individual members join the AESQ subject matter interest groups to contribute to the reference material revision support? And June, we're not hearing you.
Sorry, could you repeat?
Yep, sir. The question is, can G22 individual members join the AESQ subject matter interest groups to help contribute to the reference material revisions? Becky, maybe?
I could answer that.
Sorry.
Yeah.
This is Becky. So the reference manual groups that are the subject matter interest groups under AESQ are open to the member companies. And we do have that new membership level category. So if you would like to become a member of AESQ and participate in the subject matter interest groups, you can help with those efforts to update the reference manuals.
Okay, there you go. Hopefully that's good. So again, everyone out there, the more participation, the better. The more we can really hear what's going on, what is needed in the market. So please feel free. Are we at time, or I have one more question that just came up?
We can take one more. Go ahead.
All right.
Jim? Hey, Jim, before you ask a question, I wanted to address something that I saw in the chat earlier today related to 9145 and why additional requirements in our standard, why we can't standardize. So you know, being a part of 9145 and AS 13100, I can tell you that both sides are entrenched. 9145 was a little bit ticked off that 13100 added additional requirements beyond 9145, and 13100 team was equally adamant that the 9145 doesn't go far enough to meet the needs of the Aero engine's requirements. And so 9145 is undergoing a rewrite to adopt the 13100 elements. And once that's done, then we will back off of our requirements so we have a consistent 9145 platform.
Good. Thank you, Larry. Okay. The last question is on lead auditor training. Okay. There are requirements in AS 13100 for the level of skills that lead auditors, regular auditors, and all sorts of auditors need to have. The question here is about lead auditors, which is, you know, sort of the highest of the requirements. Are lead auditors allowed to train internal auditors, or must all auditors attend third-party training? What is the definition for lead auditor? Lead for each audit or leader of the audit program? Helen, are you able to unmute yet?
Jim, we only have the 9 speakers that can unmute.
Okay, there we go. So she's not able to. I know she's yelling at the phone right now. Larry? Larry, you got to turn on your mic, Larry.
Thought I did. Sorry. Yeah, I provided a similar response to a question that came in individually that I answered through Becky and the supplier. So let me just say that the lead auditor term is the person leading an audit. An audit administrator would be one, in my opinion, that was over the entire audit structure. But a lead auditor is the person responsible for the execution of an audit. And a lead auditor, by definition, can, if they are adequately certified and pedigreed, they can do an internal training program to train others.
Yeah, I think that was the idea. Yeah, I think there's even wording in AS 13100 that says should attend an industry level course, something like an AS 9100 lead auditor course. I mean, a significant number of quality auditors do go through that course, but that I know we had flexibility in there for allowing people to take that course and then bring them back to their own companies, develop an internal course that meets the requirements of that and achieves the goals of it, and then be able to use that internally. It was a big thing with our friends at Honeywell. All right, there are plenty of other subjects, and like I said, during the meeting, a lot of our members were answering those questions online. I've gathered the answers as well as the questions, and these will be posted as soon as we can, and we will answer any other questions that haven't been answered already or weren't discussed here, and we'll get those feedback back to you. So if you want to keep sending them, I will keep collecting them until we're 100% done here. I guess that's it for me.
Yes, so Barbara, would you like to say anything?
Absolutely. Get me off mute here. So, you know, I just want to thank everyone. As you can see, we're all learning and growing together. So I think we have made some great progress. We recognize that the deployment will take time, and starting as early as possible and going through the gap analysis. We tried to provide consistent tools for you to go through that analysis so that as you talk to each company, you're not recreating the wheel or using our own particular spreadsheets. You're able to do it once and then talk to all of us. And we want to hear from you on what we can create to help you deploy and implement better. What we can create as an industry, and then all use has got to be easier than all of us, working and creating things on our own. And that's really our goal here. So thank you for your engagement. Voice of the supplier is really important to us, as well as partnership, understanding. And we'll see you at the next supplier forum. Thanks a lot and have a great day.
Bye, everyone.